everybody, and welcome to our episode of Leading Change Live, where we're going to put Bryan into the hot seat and ask him whatever kinds of questions our hearts desire throughout the day today. So before we get to all of the great question asking fun, Bryan,
yes,
I think most of the people that are going to be joining us know who you are joining us because they know you. But just in case we've got a couple of stragglers coming in, can you please give everybody an introduction?
Sure. So I'm Bryan Falchuk. I've got like the two colors behind me. I kind of wear two hats. One is like industry veteran, carrier side, consultant side, and insurtech side. And so I've used all of those experiences to put out content and do some advisory and consulting work to try to help the industry kind of move forward. And that's like my book series, The Future of Insurance, and podcasts and stuff, which you've been a guest host on, but not a guest yet. Got to fix that. And then the other side of my life is, or my work life at least, is that I run an industry trade organization called PLRB that is largely claims focused, but we support the industry in delivering coverage. So figuring out if things are covered or not, what the weather situations were around an event, what the building codes are, doing tons of education, lots of in-person stuff. And we've been around for since like 1947. And I just took over as CEO in January. So very exciting and really great working with that team to kind of think about where the industry's headed and how we stand by carriers moving forward.
So I'm going to probably end up having, I'm hoping, lots of questions coming in from everybody that's joining us. I know we're just getting started and it's early in the morning, so we're going to give people a minute to get going. But we did have a couple of comments that came in prior to the start of the event to ask questions. And so far, my favorite one that I think is a really good one to get us started came from Philip Morris. And he asked what your spirit animal is. So I want to get started there today.
That's one I don't think I've ever really thought about. And so like, I keep going to what I wish it was, because I don't know if I know what it is, but like, I have always wished I could fly. And so, like a falcon or a hawk, or, I mean, could be an eagle, but like some raptor bird, even though I'm vegan, that just like, you can see it flying. You're like, that's an amazing, like we have hawks around it. We have a lot of bunnies around us too. So we have a lot of hawks, and they just look incredible in flight. So something that can do that, and like you see it in the sky and you immediately know what it is, and like that's a powerful thing to look at. I think that's really cool. I don't know if that technically counts, and Philip can give me a hard time when I see him next.
I think you get to choose what your spirit animal is, but here's the real problem.
Yeah.
I don't know if we can be friends anymore because I've got an irrational fear of birds of prey. Actually, like all birds, but like specifically birds of prey.
And we've talked about this before. Yeah.
Yeah. And I know this is supposed to be an Ask Me Anything, but I'm going to wait until we start getting some comments. I'm going to give you a quick story at my expense here. But a couple of weeks ago, I was out for a walk and I was on the trail and I was having a really great day, and looked up and I saw a big bird, and I wasn't sure at the time what it was. And I thought to myself, this is so silly, going back to what you said, like they look so majestic, they're cruising through the sky. And I thought, this is so silly. Why am I afraid of this thing? It doesn't care that I'm down here. I'm just fine. Well, it turns out it was a vulture, and it was a pack of vultures that found something on the trail ahead of me. And I'm sitting here unsuspecting, walking along my way. And the vulture started like swooping down, and I legit just like started like heavy breathing and crying. And then I had to walk home like 3 miles after I was sobbing.
Well, I think that's an appropriate response. Like vultures, first of all, are disgusting. They serve a very necessary purpose. I love the word condor. Like I've always thought that was the coolest sounding bird, but it's a kind of vulture. And then I saw one, I was like, oh, that's like, what a waste of an awesome sounding word. But no, we're totally going down like we could talk about geese. I think geese are horrible. They're very mean.
They are.
It doesn't mean we should make foie gras with them, but like I was recovering from hernia surgery, and I went for my first walk like out in the world, and we have a little park by us. And so I was walking around the park, and there's a little water area, like a pond in the back. and there was a mother geese with her babies, and she thought I was coming to kill them. And so I'm like doing this very awkward shuffle, like semi run, but I can't move my legs that much, or like, all the surgical area would have hurt too much. So I'm like trying desperately to get away. These are not the questions people ask.
We'll get
There
to
you go. Well, I said nothing was off limits, and here I go,
Bryan
like
would be a
busting
hawk.
through.
Bryan would be a hawk. I'm not sure if we'd be friends. Robin in the comments said she'd be a manta ray, which immediately makes me
Ooh, they're also beautiful.
They
Oh my
are.
God, seeing them like fly through the. All right, we'll go with that because they're actually not dangerous. All right,
Okay.
Robin, thank you
So
for the
we do
correction.
have a couple of other questions. We're going to do this one really quickly, and I can't see through the StreamYard application who asked this, but they asked what your go-to protein sources are as a vegan, and then we'll
Yeah.
get to some work-related stuff.
I just had my physical. My doctor asked me the same thing. I think this is like not what anyone expects. I really put zero thought into it. I used to when I first became vegan, and I realized like I need to correct things, but I don't think about what I eat at all now. I just eat a ton, and it's pretty varied. So you'd be shocked. A lot of leafy greens have protein. So I eat tons of leafy greens all day, but then I also have like nuts and like the things that you hear about. I don't eat a ton of like tofu, just because I don't like squeezing the liquid out of it. It's annoying. But yeah, I really don't put a lot of thought into it. I have a couple of like these Go Macro bars right next to my desk, and my stock in them diminishes rapidly throughout the day. So I get the protein heavy flavors, but that's more because I enjoy them than it is about the protein. And I have a protein shake. I should have it every day. I don't with my workouts. I just kind of forget, but like, it's not an issue. And that's a big surprise for people. Is like, well, how do you get your protein? Like, I don't care. I get enough protein. My numbers all look good. Like, it's fine. So after a certain point, you stop worrying about it and you just eat and everything works out.
You've learned your strategies. All right. So now I will segue us into some slightly more work-related questions here. So again, I think this might be Anna, if I'm looking at the chat correctly in between my screens, but what career-related skill are you learning right now?
Well, relearning, having to learn at a totally different level, I would say. I've worked in corporate settings for years and client service settings. And so you definitely need to have good, like, patience and people skills and all that. Not everyone is as like aggressive with change or with jumping on things or getting things done as you can be. And that's definitely something I've struggled with over times. Like, is a moment I'm extremely unproud of, where this guy was just taking so long to figure out how to navigate Excel, like while it was projected in front of this whole meeting. And so I just like kind of politely, but pushed him aside and took over. That ain't great. And then I worked for myself for a few years, before taking a PLRB role. And so like, that's fantastic, but also you unlearn some of the things you would have learned about just like interpersonal skills, which I think a lot of us have dealt with, like coming back in person more. So I think that's been probably the best reminders. I love people. I love inspiring people. I love like watching their eyes light up when they figure out what it is you wish that they knew, or like, where you wish they would take themselves. So I think getting reacquainted with waiting and allowing and not giving the answer. And I just say, like, the team at PLRB has been awesome putting up with me as I stumble through that, but also like we just did a design thinking training with Cake and Arrow last week. And it was awesome. Like, I purposely did not participate. I was there, but I wasn't in any of the teams because I just wanted them to see it. And like, watching them come alive and engage with it was a really good reminder of like, dude, like, you don't have to have the answers. You don't have to do everything. Sit back, give people the space to grow. So that's, I think, like, as a leader, I think that's one of the most important skills is like being humble and being able to sit back, and trust in your people. And it's been very cool watching them just like engage in everything and get excited by it. So they've made it easy for me, but I've probably made it harder on them. So we'll see. But So far, so good. Like, it's been a lot of fun, and there's so many opportunities for us that like there's lots of these moments where you get to be like, oh wow, this is really cool.
Well, I think it's also really important that you're recognizing that that's an evolution and a continuing thing to work
Yeah.
on soft skills, because I think you and I have had this conversation in the context of technology and everything else, but when you start to look at what's going to be left after we automate and as we bring in more and more technology, every single role is going to need to pay more attention to soft skills.
Yeah.
And outside of elementary school, where we have social emotional learning, where they teach you not to hit people, we don't spend a lot of time in traditional career development and traditional education really looking at how do we hone in on and sharpen those soft skills. So the fact that you're focusing on that, I think, is just even acknowledging that there's always work to do there is a big accomplishment.
Yeah, and it like ultimately it's all that matters, because all the technical skills, like it's very like I love spreadsheets. I could play with them all day. I'm building one. I was building one right before we got on here, and it like that's my happy place. But like there's always someone who's better at something technical than you are. There's always a resource, a tool, person you can turn to, but you can't outsource how you behave and how you interact and how you support people. So that's like the one thing that like there's no crutch you can lean on with this. You've got to invest in it and make it important.
So we do have some more questions coming in, but I would be a bad host if I didn't plug that everybody, whatever question it is, serious or non-serious, throw them into the chat. We're going to try to get to as many of them as we can. But we also did this as a live event as opposed to pre-recording it so that we could have interaction from you. So tell us where you're joining from, any fun fact. If you want to answer one of the questions that we're talking about, like Robin did, throw your responses into the chat. Let's make it feel like we're all together today, even though we're not in person. Yeah. So I've got another question from Meredith about juggling the balance between all of the different things that you've got going on. So PLRB, your podcast, your family,
Yeah.
you're a runner, all of these things. How do you balance all of that?
Mostly because I'm getting over a broken foot, so the running part hasn't been an issue. So that's given me lots of free time. No, and I would say Meredith, I'm sure she's goes through the same thing because she's super busy and she's all over the place across the industry as well. So I think I've always been like frenetic, not like discombobulated, messy frenetic, but like I always do a lot of things. Like that's who I've been as long as I can remember. And so like, I used to be really obese and I think people just assume you're lazy. And I definitely I was doing tons of things. So it wasn't like just because I was sitting around. So I've always been this way. I have a capacity to get a lot done in less time than lots of people might. And to have to juggle a lot of different things. It's just who I am. And it like, if anyone's read my first book, Do a Day, like you get a feeling for why. Like it has to do with how I was raised and situations I was in. It was a survival thing, which is difficult and has a downside. But the plus side is I can take on a lot. I can produce a lot. I'm tired. I'm definitely like I'm noticing my capacity is not what it once was, and I would like to see a little bit of a shift. But I think my wife and I were just having this conversation. Like, you can't just keep waiting for like people to stop bothering you, or like, for things to stop hitting your plate. Or when I hear people like, I just have to get through this at work and then it'll be fine. I'm like, that's not really the way the world. Like, we just have to get through hurricane season and then like losses will be fine. It's like, really? Because do you know how many carriers have already exceeded their cat threshold for the year? And we haven't even had a named storm yet. Like, so it's not just hurricane season, my friends. It keeps coming. So it's a bit of who I am. I have learned, to the new skills thing, I've learned to say no a little bit more. And I feel terrible. Like for anyone who's reached out on LinkedIn and I'm like, I'm sorry, I don't have the time for this right now. I absolutely hate doing that. But I have had to do that a little bit more. Actually, the PLRB thing has made that a bit easier because I have a ready-made excuse. Like, oh, sorry, it's a conflict of interest with my day job. I can't. And then they don't push anymore because like, oh.
But it is, to your point, it's a really difficult balance. Ooh, a difficult balance if you are not good at saying no to get used to not feeling bad, even if you're not doing it from a bad place.
Yeah.
Because I'm a person that says yes a lot too. And
I
so that
benefited from
really
that.
difficult. Yeah. And
Yeah.
it can be really difficult to balance that. So it is more so than it's like figuring out what those priorities are, drawing some hard lines around those priorities and figuring out how you work within those bounds.
Yeah.
That's a skill in itself. It's not an easy thing to do if you fall into that category of a yes person.
Yeah. And there's definitely room for working smarter. No question. And I've done a lot of that, like producing my podcast episodes is much less work than it was when I started. But, you know, I'm cheap, so I don't have a virtual assistant or anything like a lot of podcasters. Like, I'm sure there's more I could do in that respect. To be fair, I also like, my son's a teenager. If he was still a little kid, that would probably be tougher. My wife's had a lot of health issues. She's much more stable than she was like a decade ago. So that's part of how I can do what I do is like my life is, you know, like things have stabilized out to the point where like I don't have to be on the family side as 24/7 as I would have, you know, with the younger kid or, you know, says the guy to the woman with 2 young kids.
We've got one upstairs who's sick right now, so Dad's with her. But here's the true support coming through. And I wasn't going to put his comment on here, but James did ask, are you a Lord of the Rings fan because of how much rhyming with contour that Tolkien loves to do in his books?
I mean, I've read it, but that's not my jam.
That's not your thing. Are you okay? So then I'm going to ask my own question, and then we'll get back to again some of the more serious like business mind. Are you a Harry Potter fan then?
I like Harry Potter more than Lord of the Rings, but again, it's not. So here's the real reason. I can't follow who's who and what's what. Like, I don't like, honest to God, that's really difficult for me. I don't know why. I've always found that I'm like, wait, who are they talking about? Is this a good person or I don't know. The Witcher, the same thing.
Keep making Hermione jokes or something like that into the chat.
Hermione, I can remember because it's like the name stands out. But yeah, like I've been watching The Witcher on Netflix, which is enjoyable, but half the time I'm like, yeah, I don't know who they're talking about right now. There's like 3 characters I can follow. Anyone else, I'm out.
Okay, so I keep clicking on the wrong thing here, but I did want to bring up a question from Mike. So what are your thoughts? And we've had actually, before we dive into this, I did see another question that's tied to this idea of embedded insurance. So Randall asked, where is our collab series on
Where have they been?
We actually have done more collaborative TikToks than I've done with anybody else. So I'll get into your DMs and I'll send them your way. Yeah. But the segue here is the very first one that we did. Bryan buried himself in the snow to talk about the trend of embedded insurance.
Yes. So I embedded myself in the snow.
So back to Mike's question. What are your thoughts on the evolution of embedded insurance, pros, cons, challenges, opportunities? Yeah.
So I'm bullish on embedded. I think like so many things, the timescales that we hear about are not accurate or, you know, perhaps a bit off. I don't think this is like blockchain where, I mean, we've been talking about blockchain for almost a decade and it's still kind of not here. And I think that's still a technology looking for a, you know, like a problem to solve. Embedded's different. I think it's the way that a lot of insurance products will be bought in the future. Those may or may not be existing products. So I think it works beautifully for a lot of smaller products, warranty kind of stuff, things like that. But I do think it works for some more established products that are more meaningful, auto, home, professional indemnity, GL, cyber. Like I think embedded actually makes a ton of sense in a lot of those spaces. What needs to change though is the underlying consumer, the purchasing mechanism for the thing that the insurance is tagging onto. And you know, I put out a piece. We've talked about this before on the auto side, just as an example, because I think it's a lot clearer what the puzzle pieces are there. But you can make the same argument for many other areas where there are dynamics in the core auto market driven by the auto manufacturers that will force a number of changes in what it means to buy a car and to own a car. And those changes lend themselves really, really well to embedded insurance. And it goes beyond just lend themselves well. The automakers are all very openly, publicly in their annual statements talking about their insurance strategy, and it's all embedded. And you could say, like, yeah, we've heard that before. They're going to sell a lot. The automakers are already selling hundreds of millions of dollars of insurance. These are going to be multi-billion-dollar businesses. Other than Tesla, I haven't seen anyone who's talking about capitalizing their own carrier, nor do I think they will. And I go into why that is in the piece that I wrote. But, and I'm not like trying to hide it and make you get the piece. Like, it's free. You can just check it out.
Anybody who wants it, throw something in the comments, and either Bryan or I'll get you a message with it after the
fact. But I do think embedded will take off. I think it will be, it's still going to be a while, because like you're talking about changing consumption habits, but like rewind to online quoting, like the internet was here for many years before it really became pervasive. I think it's the same thing. Is we need to get a few more things to change and to settle into the way that people transact before they'll get comfortable adding insurance in. But I think those things are coming. So I think 2030 is probably a little bit aggressive. 2035, that could make sense. By 2040, I don't think we'll be questioning it as much. That's a ways off. The only thing is, like, at the speed that this industry moves at, that actually means you do need to be taking some actions today. Like, system
it actually matters.
Yeah. So like this is absolutely a moment of planting seeds. And a lot of those seeds, I think you need to plant for the long term anyway, even if embedded never goes anywhere. They're enablers more than like throwing $20 billion into an embedded strategy. Like, that's not the story. But I'm very bullish on embedded. I just think, like any tech, it needs more time scale to it.
Okay. So we've got another question here. So if a startup plans to launch a new insurance product, would it be better to work with an MGA, with an insurance carrier partnership, or partner directly with the carrier?
So if you're launching a new insurance product, I guess what I'm curious about is, why would you partner with an MGA and not build an MGA? Because that's usually, like, when I read the first part of that sentence, the next is like, so we're setting up an MGA. Should we be setting up our own carrier?
I'm glad that I'm not the only one that had that thought as I was
reading. That's interesting. Like, I definitely want to understand more about. I think it's going to depend on the product. Like, maybe there is a space that's like, oh, okay, I get that. I get why there's already existing players. You're enabling them to do something different. A lot of times when you see a startup with a new product idea, they can't partner with someone, or there's a strong reason, kind of business strategy and process and go to market wise, that partnering with an existing MGA doesn't make sense. The only exception I've seen is, like, I think about like State National, where the MGA kind of was the carrier at the same time, and then Markel bought them anyway. So yeah, that's not the way that I would have structured it. I would have thought you're creating your own MGA, and that's very doable. It's a lot of work, but it's very doable. And there are a number of kind of SaaS-ish solutions out there to support the setting up of an MGA. The economics are less favorable, but from talking to, like, Cowbell took that approach where they worked with Boost for one of their products. And, the economics don't look as good in terms of like the rev share and commissioning as they do on the products that Cowbell built themselves. But it got them to market so much faster, and it allowed them to focus on distribution so much more than all of the nuts and bolts. And that's part of why they were able to move as quickly and get to unicorn status as fast as they did, is they just focused on making this thing win, and not all of the nuts and bolts behind it. So there's like, it's not a black and white decision tree anymore. There's a lot of gray branches out there.
So I want to give everybody a warning. We are, and I know this is like a short period of time, so maybe I can bring Bryan back for another episode in the future. But I would also say, continue to throw questions into the comments. Either one of us or both of us will interact with you there. So just tag us in the comment if you've got a question after the live broadcast ends. If we've got enough, maybe we schedule another episode moving forward. If not, we'll certainly respond via text to you. And then my selfish ask to everybody as well, in the comments, tell me if you think that these types of Ask Me Anything live streams and panel discussions and kind of turning Leading Change live into a regular monthly series is something that you'd like to see. So tell me in the comments if that's something that you'd like to see, in addition to throwing any other questions that you've got in there. I've got a couple more that I want to try and get to before we end our time together, Bryan. So this one from Timothy is, with the increased adoption of data analytics and artificial intelligence by insurtechs, how is PLRB supporting its members and leveraging these technologies to enhance claims processing and underwriting efficiency?
I'm trying to think what I'm able to share. That's more a watch this space than like here's the 3 explicit things. But there are some things that we've been doing. Like our weather services are pretty rich, and they're no cost to our members. That just come with your membership, as is everything that we do. And all of that weather data is available by API. So, for example, one of our very large members, because they hit our API a lot, every property first notice of loss that comes in, they ping our weather services and get the full suite of the whole picture of what was going on at the time of loss, which then drives a lot of their models in terms of how they allocate the claims and, deploying resource. Like it's part of the decisioning that drives their response, and other things. So part of that is a watch this space. We have a new website that's coming out by the end of the year, or at the end of the year.
Look at that teaser. We didn't even know we were setting you up for it.
Yeah.
And now there's suspense and demand for this new site.
That's going to be a huge enabler for us. Anyone who's used our current site, like the information's great. Site's not the easiest to get through and to get to what you need. So stay tuned on that. But once that's in place, that becomes a big unlock. But we've got APIs that people can tap into, and it's free. So why not? So yeah.
Okay. So last kind of seriouser question. What tech do you foresee having the most impact in the property underwriting over the next decade?
Yeah, that's a really tricky one, because I think there's a lot of very cool tech that hits property underwriting and property claims, and helping on property claims helps the underwriting, because property underwriting is struggling right now on the loss side. But I think it's more what enables the product solutions that allow us to continue to write property insurance. Can't just pull out of every corner of the market and paint ourselves into a little box that then where do you go from there? We have to find a way to allow it to be sustainable. And I think there's very interesting solutions, whether it's new modeling, like there's some great fire modeling that's out there, aerial tools and others. That's awesome. I'm very interested in the parametric side. So I'm a mentor to a company called Sola that does tornado parametric, and they're building a hail and wind product as well. I think we need to look at things like that, where we're not willing to write in a state because of peril X. And if we were, insureds couldn't buy because it's so expensive. So then like home ownership becomes an issue. I mean, it's like this domino effect. What if we could carve out those exposures and create an affordable form of coverage? It's not indemnity coverage with really high limits, but it's something that allows people to recover and move forward with their lives, and yet is affordable. And you can get reinsurance for it and all the things that you're starting not to be able to do with a lot of exposures on indemnity. That's what I'm interested in. And I know that's not like a sexy tech that people are necessarily thinking about, but that takes a tremendous amount of technology to deploy to truly make it parametric. So I'm really curious about how that plays out. And I mean, like a week has not gone by without some pullout of a major geography by a major carrier for the past several weeks. Mm-hmm. So that's why I'm excited about that stuff is, well, then where does the industry go? We have to find a way to continue to offer coverage even when it's difficult.
Okay, so last question, slightly less serious, still industry related, and we're going to round it out with, who are your top influencers in the insurance space, whether it's companies or people, and we'll make it like under top 10 so that we can.
All right. Well, I mean, like, in all fairness, I'm like, you're definitely one of the people that you've been super inspiring to me and pushed me a lot, which is awesome. Then Roy, you're not one of them. I'm sorry, but but I love you. But the way that I met you is, so it's encapsulating you. So InsurTech New York has been, I don't live in New York. I did briefly, but I'm not a New York person, but they've always had this very open door policy to the entire industry. That community, I think, more than anything else, especially when I was starting out with Insurance Evolution Partners and the Future of Insurance, has been unbelievably successful, supportive, and just committed to the success of everyone who participates in it. So a huge shout out to Tony Liu and David Gritz. I have to. And then I've just been really lucky to have an incredible network of friends and mentors and colleagues. Nick Lamparelli. I've got a mentor I got to catch up with him this weekend, who's just been incredible. A guy named Andy Pincus, who's run claims for a bunch of carriers and is CEO at one now. Andy has stood by me and guided me for years, and I'm really thankful for that. And I think we all have those things, is like, who do we look to? And I know like there's plenty more I could name. I love the way that you can support and network and connect with people in this industry, and like Lisa Wardlaw and Sabine Vanderlinden, like all of these people who are just like, we're here, we're doing this, and we want to help each other. That's a really cool thing to be a part of. So like, yeah. And the list is probably like 10,000 long.
Oh, yeah. And I mean, even just yesterday, there was a post about like women to watch in the insurance industry, and the amount of names that are just listed, in the comments, and people having conversations. And, there's obviously a time and a place to celebrate women specifically, but also just, I've said it before and I'll continue to say it again. I've been incredibly shocked and pleasantly surprised with the amount of support that's across the entire insurance industry. Yeah. And coming in as somebody who really wasn't exclusively focused on insurance for a large portion of my career so far, to see the support and excitement surrounding this industry and the amount of effort and energy going towards changing and modernizing it is really exciting. And I was just having this conversation yesterday. The insurance industry offers people such a really cool way to build their career and build it in the way that they want to, with all different kinds of experiences that you might not even think about when you initially think about insurance, which you can't do if you go into medicine. You have a license, you practice where you are. If you're a lawyer, you practice the type of law that you have an expertise in. If I had stayed in teaching, I would be teaching the same subject matter and maybe getting, incremental pay raises for additional education or changing into administration. But you need degrees to do all of those things. The amount of potential and support that's within this industry, I think, is unparalleled from what I've seen so far. Yeah.
And I think I've talked to people who take a different view on it, and they're like, well, you can't be sharing things with people, very like antitrust. So much of what we do is public. Our filings are public, our like everything. So to have a conversation about the direction of the industry, to have a conversation about, I'm struggling with this, how would you navigate it? There are some people who are like, that's off limits, and that's fine. But I think that's a different generation and mindset to the industry. And it's not what I find to be commonplace today. The people who are willing to, thank you, who just said that. People who are willing to just support each other and embrace like all that possibility that you just described, Emma. That just takes all of us being like, yeah, I'm up for that. And I'm so thankful the number of people who, when I've reached out and asked a question or asked to engage, and been like, yeah, when do you want to talk? I mean, and I try to do the same thing back. I can't always, but like, if we're willing to do that, then it's a lot more fun to work in the space. Mm-hmm. The possibilities are a lot greater. And you have to remember why we exist in the first place. Like, we're putting lives back together, but we're also allowing lives to be lived because risk isn't stopping them in their tracks. And so like, it is a really important industry, and we should commit to supporting each other to make this better. So it's a lot of fun if you allow it to be.
So we've gone over our time today, Bryan, but I want to especially thank you for always being up for trying out new ideas, being my guinea pig, whether it's with burying yourself in the snow for a TikTok.
That sounds so good right now. Oh my God.
Coming on for the first Ask Me Anything. I see in the comments that there were a number of people that said that they'd like to see this series, whether it's these one-on-ones or panel discussions on a monthly basis. So everybody who's joined, thank you so much for joining us. Keep tuned for a monthly Leading Change Live. And my last little plug for everybody before I say a final thank you to Bryan is earlier this week, I launched the Leading Change newsletter. which will start being distributed to anybody that is subscribed on Monday. And it's going to include a exclusive video that you're not going to find anywhere else, whether it's on my TikTok or LinkedIn or YouTube, along with curated resources for everybody to be paying attention to on a weekly basis. So if you're not already subscribed to that, head over to my profile. There's a little link that you can follow there. And keep an eye out for more episodes of Leading Change Live. But Bryan, thank you so much for joining me, and everybody that came into the comments. Let us know if you've got other questions. Maybe we'll schedule another session.
Thank you so much, Emma.
Have a good day, everybody.